Tarkovsky said about film, if you're looking for the meaning, you will miss everything. And that's interesting because this is the one film I wish Tarkovsky would see. And I loved his review for this movie. It's Holy Motors.
Yeah.
And I think we're gonna spend a whole time trying to explain the meaning of it. But I think the meaning of it is kind of the whole purpose of it is you're missing everything.
Yeah, this feels kind of like something that David Lynch would dream. Or maybe something he'd like, what his television set would look like as he flips through different lives. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram. We'll be posting, though, there where our next Q&A will be, so you can be cited and we'll answer some of your questions. Today we're going to talk about a film I regard as the the third best film of the last decade. That's a little bit high for you, but we're going to talk about why it's so high for me. It's Holy Motors.
Yeah. Well, you don't know. It might be on my top 10.
We don't know yet.
It's seen it when we did
first
our
time
top
watching.
10s.
That was first time watching for
So,
Kyle. Yeah.
Mr. Oscar has a long day ahead of him. His driver takes him all around the city, dropping him off at various appointments where he must become a beggar woman, a cold-blooded killer, and much, much more.
If you always talk about if you take a film theory class, the emphasis, and especially if I taught this class, was talk about that real logic does not match up to film logic. And a great sequence is like in Jurassic Park when Sam Neill takes off his glasses to look better at the dinosaurs because he's so shocked. You will not do that in real life. You would like, what is that? But in movie logic, that makes sense.
Yeah.
In this movie, film logic is analyzed and critiqued as well as broken up. It's an investigation of film logic.
Okay.
As well as, for me, an existential crisis investigation.
Yeah, it feels like a Rick and Morty episode in some ways, where it's kind of taking you from vignette to vignette, and everything's kind of ratcheting up from the bottom upwards. I saw it as a very much a film logic dictates further film logic. Yeah, the film sets you up. It's a good thing that even though that first scene ultimately doesn't do a whole lot for the rest of the narrative of the film, that it sets you up for what you're seeing.
It shows the audience watching movies, almost like it lulls them to sleep, and that's almost a disdainment of it.
Yeah.
People watching movies brain dead almost.
Mm-hmm. But there's a lot to be said for the film and the fact that, he's not really surrounded, Mr. Oscar is not really surrounded by cameras, that his name is Mr. Oscar.
Yeah, Academy Award.
As searching for the right performance, if you will. What I really saw out of it, too, is the dream narrative of it all. The film is a dream logic kind of a film that felt to me, in some ways, as the critique of modern work.
Yes.
The person who is literally doing everything possible to make ends meet, how he spends his day going around the city, taking all these different parts, as you will, to make up for lost time, to make money. So I thought the film is scathing in kind of a way as how we deal with the modern work ethic as well, versus the classic 50s work ethic.
It's also, right, it's Leo Cosmic, and pretty much an existential, it's almost like Alfred Hitchcock did with Frenzy. It's as angriest as the most disdain of where movies are going, as well as Leo's investigation of where movies going. The fact that it's getting so advanced, we're losing some of the stuff that we could done years ago.
Yep.
There's a great point in the movie where he does CGI work. Denis of Lavant, the actor, who does great stunts for CGI. We're not seeing the CGI. We're actually seeing the real performance.
Yeah.
And he's stripping away, and I think Leo's telling us that sometimes we don't have to put the computer graphics on the screen to see a great performance.
Yeah.
And there's a great scene of him getting on the treadmill with the gun and him trying to probably metaphorically catch up to the advancements of cinema, and he's not doing it until he fires off his gun. It's a great metaphor for what Leo's trying to explain to this movie.
Well, even the comparison piece of how much more emotional the interaction he has with the female motion capture artist there, to when we actually do see what's going on the screen. Yeah. And it's very wooden, very illogical.
Right.
Yeah, we don't feel the emotion watching the finished product. We feel the emotion watching the two of them interacting, if you will. And maybe that's because it's a heightened sexuality and people respond to sexuality. I don't know. There's a Freud question there for me, but it is on play.
So in Denis Villeneuve is probably living out an actor's life, but also demonstrating what people do in real life. They do different like a father daughter scene. being a hitman. It's almost like hitting all the genres of film.
Yep.
But then you go back to yourself eventually, which is inside the vehicle.
Yeah.
Where he's looking for his next appointment, the next role to do.
Mm.
And in the movie, he cites that he misses the cameras. We have a camera, it's a small, this one. He misses the large ones. And as actors for film, you've always been told that you have to act for the camera. And he kind of misses that element, he's losing that element that his performances are missing because of that.
And in some ways, you might say that's why he's being critiqued as he doesn't seem like he's into it anymore. Yeah. You know, that film has moved past him. That the narrative has moved past him, and he's no longer, he's kind of struggling to keep up, you know, like the treadmill sequence shows. Yeah, that's what I think is captivating enough about the film, is that the subtext is really incredible. But as I always say, subtext is meaningless without text. And this film does have strong enough text to carry.
The text
that
is
subtext.
really super thin, though.
Yeah, it's dream narrative, because we wake up with this very Lynchian opening of the man who's got the piece on his finger, and he can open up and walk into the movie theater, and
he lives in the theater. Right, yeah.
He's got there's that Lynchian dream logic where if you accept the first scene, everything else carries through with it just fine. It's just how, if you can get into what's being done in a textual way as a dream narrative, then the subtext works. But that's going to be the hardest thing for people to get to.
That first couple minutes.
Is I made the decision watching that movie. This is one of the few films that I agree with you on. Do your research before you see it, at least enough to know what you're getting into. Yep. Not ruin the film experience, but what you're getting into.
So if you didn't really know who Leah Carax is, he's from France. He does filmmaking. And I would say this is kind of like almost if Marty Scorsese was doing a film critique about the advances of film, he'd probably hire Robert De Niro to do a bunch of scenes, and then you hire Joe Pesci to critique why you keep doing this.
Yeah.
And he's like, I miss the camera works and all this stuff. So it's almost like if they did Americanized version of it, I would see Marty Scorsese, and then, interject some scenes of previous movies that he did, maybe bring some characters like Sheridan Stone and, like Investigation, like that. So all of that, Leo brings back, cites his own movies into this film. He wanted Juliette Binoche to be part of this film because Juliette Binoche and Dennis did a couple movies together with Leo.
And Leo's was dating her at some point. I don't think they ever got married, but they were together. So he wanted to kind of have her be that forgotten love as well.
Yeah. So, and Juliette said no. Probably the reason why.
For normal reasons.
So they got Kylie Minogue, and they got her to do her songs in there. But if you understand the emphasis of what he's trying to do, like, we're never going to see each other. We're not going to have this emotional connection anymore. Then you understand the angst, because he kicks the floors again, because they're never going to retain what they had in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, not only that, too, but, taking the idea that he wanted to put a former love in that role, he wanted to showcase that the art style, we often see, these wonderful romances in the world of actors, that we fall, and they're like, they're never going to break up, and then they break up. And it's like, well, when you spend your time doing these movies where you're having intimate emotional scenes with other people, there can be that kind of like blurring of lines. And I think he's critiquing that as well, as like, doing this is something I have to do as a filmmaker, but I kind of hate it at the same time because it causes me to lose people nearby me. I think there is kind of an angry, like you pointed out, a Hitchcockian frenzy anger towards the very thing that he's making here. And that you can see that with Kylie Minogue in the role. He had also wanted to do, it's ironic, again, the film has all these like ironic layers to it, that the KM model character, which was eventually portrayed by Eva Mendes in the film, was originally written for Kate Moss because they didn't get to work together when they wanted to, and so he wrote this role so that she could be in the film.
Specific for Kate Moss.
KM, if you will, was not able to be in it, so he had to cast
someone else
movie.
Again. We know that.
It
happens sometimes in movies. And I'm glad they brought up the scene of the photographer, because I think what he's using for the photographer is the emphasis of audience's reactions to movies. Oh my God, that's beautiful. Beautiful, yes. Everything is arrangement. But then look at the monster. Oh, that's so weird. I love it. I love it. And I think that certain scene is the reaction that he's investigating of audience. They want to see the beauty and the beast at the same time. They want to see them to get together. They love the counterpoint. Alfred Hitchcock always talks about the counterpoints. And I think he's trying to use the photographer as the metaphor of audience reactions to films. Yeah.
And it's almost like he's not even saying that he's saying it, but he's saying that we're saying it as viewers.
Yes.
That whole sequence is very... My frustrating part with that sequence is I don't feel like that sequence ends the way I wanted it to, or it ends in a way that feels like normal once they get into that cave and you're like, okay, where's it going from here? And then it just kind of cuts out, like it kind of disappears from that moment. There's even the fact that he's critiquing the natural beauty standards by casting Edith Scobe as the driver of Celine, who is known for Eyes Without a Face, a film where she wears a mask.
She cites at the end of the movie. She puts the same mask back on.
And so I think it's captivating that he wrote a character for her in a previous film where all the scenes were cut. So he promised, I'll give you a more substantial role in this film. Gives her the driver, who you wouldn't consider to be a substantial role in a film, but she actually gets a lot to do.
Right.
And then I think he's also critiquing the fact that, she is a beautiful person who's known for playing a character where we don't see her beauty at all throughout the film. And it's kind of, again, like that irony about, like, casting people based on a look, even if you don't plan on using that look, playing back and forth with that as well.
So what I want to emphasize, it's almost filmmaking, talking about film logic and film theory, as well as stripping away the results, but also showing the process. Not really showing the CGI, but showing with the mechanics of CGI. The dying father, but also hold the scene of, after the scene is done, how actors kind of engage each other. Oh, you didn't really met on, this is the first time you're meeting each other.
Together soon.
Thanks for doing that lovely scene together. So it's almost like we want to break up the barrier of pull the mask behind the magic and show that sometimes the mechanics of the magic is even better than what we see final result on film.
Yeah. Part of me wants to see an 8-episode series, like not full feature length, but like 30-minute vignettes where like he gets to spend, like, what would this have looked like? What would the film he's making look like? I really want to see the wife and son that are chimps. I want to see that film at some point and see what Leos Carax would do with that film.
I think the emphasis is what they show when he lives with primates is strip away that all the things we do, the work and labor and acting, that we're still very close to our relatives of just the simple functions.
We're still performing for the id and ego of it all,
So I love all of the movie. The ending when they have the talking cars.
I love that. That's my favorite part of the movie, I think, is because I didn't know where we could go at that point, and then the cars start talking and they're having the same conversation that the humans are. Have we moved past our prime? Is there something replacing us?
Are we just working to work? Are we doing something more? Are we just going through the mechanics?
Yeah.
And that's why they call Holy Motors.
Yep. Yeah, I wish we had actually gotten more of the talking car earlier in the film. I just think it would have been more engaging to have the cars engaged on a level like the two cars at a stoplight talking about their days, the monotony of travel.
Right, we just go to point A to point B. We do certain roles for certain scenes.
Yeah.
And then we go on and do the next stage and next stage. And is there an end to this, or are we just doing it to entertain us or stuff like that?
Yep. There's a very antithesis comparison, both in the text and subtext of this film, with Cronenberg's Cosmopolis, which is a film about a guy who's basically spending his entire day in his limo doing business. Cosmopolis is a film I really don't like.
I've never seen this one.
Yeah, so it's Robert Pattinson in a limousine the entire day doing business deals as his entire company falls apart around him. There's kind of that similar feeling to Holy Motors, and it's not just the fact that they're in limousines, but the subtextual comparison of watching the person work to work because it's what they have to do, and a couple other things that are being done there. The only difference being that I really don't like Cosmopolis. I find the film to be incredibly boring, whereas Leos Carax continues to come in and say, like, it's almost like you don't have to care about the text or the subtext of the film. It feels like it could be a Monty Python-esque film. If you were purely viewing it without anything else and just watching as like a drone watching a film, it's entertaining enough. It's silly enough. It's whimsical. It's Monty Python-esque. But it also has those elements too.
Right, yeah. And I think if you go in it blindly, you'll think it's just a performance art piece series of threads.
And it kind of is. I mean, on its very simplest layer.
Very simplest layer, but right. But the whole thing is an investigation of breaking up the illusions of filmmaking, as well as enjoying the process of making films, as well as we're moving an advancement that maybe we're not retaining things that we've got to do previous, that maybe we're losing stuff. And we talked about it in film theory that a lot of people did not like sound introduction of film. They hated it. There was a campaign to disavow it. Reviewers are like, their movies are going to be trashed from now on because of sound. And now we understand now, but looking at silent films, we did lose some things that are very magical in silent film.
Yeah, and it's why you get occasionally people going back to that well, be it The Artist or Mel Brooks' Silent Movie, where they are celebrating that odd transition. But we get that the same way we did when it went from black and white to color. We get films like Clerks that jump back and usually for budgetary reasons, or some people that just, Schindler's List retains the black and white quality for 99% of its filmmaking because they want to give it an older classical appeal to it. Every technological advancement makes you pine for things before. We're going through that right now with CGI. CGI is something that is used in every single film ever made pretty much at this point, but I still pine for the guy in the suit, getting hacked to death in the 80s horror movies. Like I pine for that kind of like slightly cheesy-esque practical effect that I buy more than I do a CGI mess moving around.
Oh yeah, well it's not Arnold's real head when he shoves the gun up his nose and pulls the plug out and
But it's like, I want that more, though. And that's, again, what we pine for when we say that CGI is killing the film business. It's probably not going to kill the film business, but it is going to change the film business.
And that's what I think Leo's emphasizing. We are changing, we're evolving, but we have to appreciate the things that we are losing as we advance. You're always going to lose stuff when you keep moving forward. And he's trying to... It's not so much an existential crisis, but he's just an alarming thing of... Just wait a minute. The old-fashioned process. Just remember, there's a lot of magic that happened when we did that.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because in a limousine, it's very difficult to look back. It's very difficult to go in reverse. You're always moving forward because in a limousine, it's very difficult to back up one of those. And
I put in my notes. And what do actors always travel in? Limousines.
Yeah.
So how they get to their showings is limousines.
There's multiple layers that can be used to diffuse the film. And I'm not going to say this isn't a movie for me that I would say it did not hit my top 10 of the decade. I'm sorry to say, but really enjoyable, entertaining, ironically, because it has so many things to say. But again, because the film doesn't force feed any of it, it allows you to parse through what works for you. Like I said, the first time I watched the film, I was surprised by how much I took in about people working themselves to death. He does work for 24 hours straight.
He actually kills himself, right? Pulls on the street and he's an assassin and he shoots himself. Right?
Yeah, so he's got elements upon elements of like us letting each other know that he could be critiquing the 40-hour work week. He could be critiquing gig workers and that kind of thing too. It goes further than just an actor on a page. I think it has universal themes. The second time I watched it, it did feel like more of an investigation of cinema itself. But again, that's because I wasn't looking for it. So it's got that kind of layer to it as well. And I think it wouldn't have worked without someone like Denis Lavant doing the film. I think Carax said he didn't want anyone living to do the role except for Denis. He said I would have gone with Lon Chaney or Charlie Chaplin, but they were dead. Which goes back to, again, to that Chaney looking back.
Probably bring his own makeup
forward. Kit. Yeah.
And I still am... How do you not nominate him for Best Actor in a Performance? Because that is a lot of...
That's the problem with it, is because he's not playing the same person. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have been nominated. I'm saying it comes down to that element of who do you call the character? Who is he playing and how can you really dive into it? It's tough because in some ways I almost want to give him a Best Supporting Actor nomination for the different characters he plays in the film. Because none of them really grasp that like unique singular vision.
Not to mention he's completely naked and showing.
Well, you got that.
Then I think the Oscars have it, hard to die because that scene in that movie with him and Eva Mendes. I think that's kind of like their reluctance to nominate him. But it's one of the best performances you'll see.
I got to ask you about that, by the way. Yeah. Was he nude on your version?
Yeah.
Like, did you see it?
Yeah.
Huh. Weird.
He's complete, and it's an erect genitals.
Huh. I watched it on a streaming service where that was blurred out.
Okay.
I was a little like, that's odd. I wonder if that's the case everywhere.
No, it's on Amazon Prime. Huh. There it is.
All right.
There's erect genitals on display.
I don't know if I'll go back and rewatch it immediately just for that, but I watched it on a streaming service where that was blurred out, and I was like, I wonder if that was intentional or not, but I guess not.
For that streaming service, yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why they didn't nominate him, because that's very hard to, you put that out there. It's kind of like...
I think it does turn certain people away, because especially back in 2012, but even prior to that, it was a bunch of old white men who didn't like change.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I think if the film had come out now, it would have been. But it also, I don't think if the film had come out now, it would have had the same effect that it did back then. So it's kind of that strugglingness to it. It was Carax's first film in 13 years. He'd not made something since 1999. And then I don't think he made anything else feature film-wise until the last year, Annette film that he had done. Yeah. So very sparse filmography. But this one does have connections to previous works. Again, I mentioned this before we started shooting, of course. The film Tokyo, with an exclamation point, does feature the character Monsieur
so Dennis
Merde.
does the same.
He does the same, one of the same characters.
One of the same characters, and then in the Tokyo, he comes out of the sewer just like he does in this movie too.
Yes. So now I have like a further place I want to go to like discover more about the film. You know.
Right, and I think that's the other enticement. I think you should see this movie is because it'll start a web of investigation in film. I want to see this movie. I want to see this movie. Like I said, I've never seen Bad Blood. I've never seen Lovers on the Bridge. I want to see those movies now.
When I just watched Eyes Without a Face a few months ago for the first time, and so I was very happy to see this film and see that the actress from the time, who has now recently passed, she gets kind of like that homage level of appeal to her, where the film is not directly Eyes Without a Facing, but it hints around at some of the similar elements at play.
It dances around it, right?
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
But even so, Michel Piccoli, I want to make sure I got that right, the man with the birthmark in the limousine, was supposed to initially be played by Carax, but he said that it might have been too on the nose to have a director in there. And it's like, well, that only speaks to more of the cinema-esque provocation.
I know who would have
there.
done it. If Rob Reiner did this movie, it would have been Rob Reiner.
Well, Rob Reiner has also acted a lot more, too.
Yeah, I know. It would have been awkward for Leo to do that, but like, yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
so I could see that element of like, I didn't want to put that in because that's maybe too on the nose. And I can see that, actually.
Plus, him and Michelle and Dana have done movies together.
Yep.
Yeah. It was almost like I said, if Marty Scorsese did it, the Michelle Piccoli would have been Joe Pesci talking to Robert De Niro.
I think it would have been Martin Scorsese. Remember that scene from Taxi Driver?
That could have been too.
He
Right.
was in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so overall, I enjoyed the film. I didn't... After 2 viewings, I'm positive on the film. I did really like it. It's not hitting my top 10 for that year or for the decade. But it's usually it's because those films for me. I'm a writer, so story is always going to like take precedence. And I appreciate that the text and subtext of this film don't take away from the story; they further the story. But again, dream narrative stuff just tends to kind of pass me by a little bit too.
And
so
still wish that Tarkovsky could have seen this movie. I'd really like to see what he thought about it.
I'd like to think that heaven is just a bunch of movie theaters. Give me a chance to catch up.
So, have you seen Holy Motors? I don't know if it'll be, even though it's a top 10 for me of the last decade, I don't know if it'll be part of my film requirement. I would put it as an option to see. Yeah.
I think for
I think it's that
French
important.
cinema, I think I would put it more in the line of like if you're trying to dive into French cinema, this is one to go for.
Yeah.
I think it is a placeholder for that. Definitely worth checking out if you're into that sort of thing. If you like David Lynch, this would be a good foreign film version of a film to check out there. But
It's another thing. I wonder what David Lynch thinks of this movie, too.
oh, I know. But yeah, let us know in the comment section below what you thought about the film, and is there a Leos Carax film we should cover next? We're both open to the idea of exploring more of his work, but hey, that all depends on you watching the show, of course. So please comment down below your thoughts on the film and the director, and don't forget to like and subscribe down below. There are things that you can do that don't cost you a dime, and they help to support the show. While you're down there as well, you can also check out the Patreon if you want to further support the show. Join some of our new patrons like Tyler Prawl, who have contribute to the show on a monthly basis and are allowed to then pick some of the films that we talk about in future episodes.
Yes.
All those links are down in the description. It's patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm. Once again, guys, you can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, a podcast you can find anywhere on the internet.
All right, so
That's
rev up
it.
your
I'm not
levels.
eating flowers. Eat flowers, you get an Oscar nomination for me.
I'd do it then.